So, we are going to unpack what is in this report. But first of all, Mark, you start. What is in your resume that made you so brilliant about being involved in this report?
I guess I would go way back to when I went to the Philippines to do my PhD research on looking at credit and agriculture and irrigation programs in the Philippines, longer ago than I'd like to think. But that started a lifelong passion for me to work in economic development, agriculture development, and water resources, and my career has really been dedicated to that since then.
Ertharin, for you, when you were deep in this, what were you thinking? I'm so glad I did blank so that I was ready for this.
So that I was ready for this. You know, can I answer that a little bit differently?
Of course.
Working on this document, what made me passionate about us getting to the right answers? It's the fact that in my resume, it's that last line that says Ertharin Cousin is the proud grandmother of 2 wonderful boys. That's what made me passionate. Because the challenge today, and when you talk to the military, they will tell you that food security and now water security, water scarcity related issues are threat multipliers. And creating challenges not for that we may experience in our lifetime, but that my grandsons will experience in their lifetimes if we don't get this right. And there's an opportunity to get it right. We have the skills, we are building the technology. What we need to ensure is that we have an equitable distribution of those skills and technologies across the entire global community to support the addressing the challenges of water scarcity and water volatility.
Ajay.
You know, as a farmer, an active farmer, just yesterday, we've had tremendous rains in California. Thank you. We need the water. And yet, my first planting, we had to make a decision whether to disc it down or not because it wasn't germinating because we got clobbered by some rain right after planting. And just years earlier with the California drought, we went through some tremendous challenges with, I had 3 fields in 3 different watersheds. The well went dry in one, we had saltwater intrusion in the other. And the third one, though, in the middle, we were using reclaimed, reused water. It was like our backup plan B that we didn't suffer through the drought because we had a secondary water supply. All of those things, we're from California. We think we should be not bulletproof, but we certainly have a lot of tools to work with. And to be that vulnerable and to know that I would have been out of business if that was my only farm when the well went dry, or that was my only farm where the saltwater intrusion happens, tells you how vulnerable the global food supply is, because we keep on saying unpredictable weather means unpredictable harvest, and that impacts then everybody else. So this report was just a great opportunity to try and remind people that your food supply is not necessarily secure just because it's at the store.
Mark, your headline.
There's not enough water as currently managed in the world to adequately feed the global population, which is a particularly big problem because global hunger has actually been increasing for the last 3 years, according to FAO. So we have to make huge efforts in order to move forward on management, institutional reform, technological reform, and policy in the area of water management, food, and nutrition.
Did you already know what you were looking for when you started down this journey, Ertharin?
Yes. What we were looking for was an opportunity to build a coalition, that task force that worked on the report, that we could go to the public with, that would help us work together to overcome what I saw as one of the major challenges in the water community, and that is that the clean water and sanitation community and the agriculture community didn't talk to each other, don't talk to each other enough. And that the coalition, the task force, the report represents those 2 communities working together, working with the World Bank, then with AGRA, to talk about smallholder agriculture and the coherence between clean water and sanitation regulation and agricultural water use regulation and cohesive policy development. And so that was the work that I was hoping that we would succeed in bringing together as a part of this effort.
I know solutions are really important for you, for people to read this and then know where do we go to next. How would you direct them?
How would I direct them? Keep talking to each other. Keep communicating, keep working together, building the coalitions, building the regulatory frames that support the use of data to understand where we have water needs and how we will use water, and then working together to build the regulatory systems that allow us to use water in a manner that is shared, but that is that adapts to the situation and is adaptable to the situations that we are in, and that recognizes that water that we are using today impacts the water that is available tomorrow.
I have a confession to make. Mark, being the brilliant person he is, had a stack of papers. He wrote a report on talking about the report, and I made him leave it back there. So Mark is just thinking, I have 5,000 things to tell this audience.
You got it.
Tell us one of them, Mark.
One of them.
Yeah.
The fundamental way forward, I think it follows on Ertharin's point too, is that we need to establish fair, equitable, and strong water rights for people. And water rights are a difficult thing to do here, even in the US with our advanced systems. In the developing world, it's extremely important. So farmers, women and men are unable oftentimes to really even invest in their own farms because they don't know if the water is going to be there or if the water is going to be diverted to others for the next season. So getting at those kinds of rights, building on customary rights and protecting women's rights is going to be an essential first step to a lot of the other things that happen.
Ajay, you like to challenge people to think about where their role is in particular issues and problems. And I know you wanted to challenge our audience about their water usage, that it's not someone else's problem over there, that it's actually our issue altogether. Do you want to speak more about that?
Sure. The figure that's often used of 70% of the water that mankind uses is used for agriculture, and it's often described as, oh, those agriculture guys are using the water, and somehow the rest of humanity doesn't have anything to do with that use. Of course, we know that everything you eat, everything you drink, has a component of water that was needed to get it to your table. And so this complicit partnership we have with the water use and then what happens with the water we consume, it can't be separated like that. It can't be, you can't say that agriculture is not a part of the rest of humanity. Indeed, agriculture is the reason humanity exists. We look for predictable food supply so that we have abundance. Of course, with abundance, we get to criticize the food system as much as we want to, right? And the opportunity to have a farmer sitting here in front of you, or hopefully farmers in the audience, and more importantly, farmers talking about the challenges we face. Without that dialogue, not monologue, but without that dialogue, we have tremendous challenges ahead of us because we need help.
How did you keep these two straight then? You bring the farmer's perspective, the farmer's knowledge. Were there any moments where you were thinking, actually, this is what's important from a farmer's perspective?
When we talk about small shareholders in Africa, for example, we're hoping it rains. We all know the numbers. I think many of us have heard of 90%, 94% of all the agriculture in sub-Saharan Africa is rain-fed. You hope it rains enough, it doesn't rain too much. Our thoughts and prayers are with the folks in the Midwest right now as they're dealing with tremendous floods. How many people know that 80% of Midwest agriculture is dependent on rain-fed agriculture? Not turning water on and off, you're hoping God turns it on and off, I guess. But this idea that irrigated agriculture, which still then is responsible for almost 40% of the food on the planet through irrigation, doesn't even quite count the small gardens for those small farmers in Africa that every day they're hand watering the family plot, which is supplying fruits and vegetables, nutrient-dense foods for those families. It's not calculated, it's not tabulated, it's not necessarily a part of this thing called agriculture, it's the home garden. Transforming those folks to be able to go to the next step and making that small garden into a small farm, what a great opportunity that is, and that's a part of what we see in this report, the opportunities that come from developed and water and the infrastructure that you have to build to make it happen.
Ertharin, ask Mark a question.
Mark, this work has been your passion. What has been or has there been a single technological advancement that has made a difference or will make a difference in how we use water?
Yeah, that's a fascinating question. I haven't seen things that are transformational. It's been an evolutionary movement from furrow kinds of flooded fields to different kinds of pumps and drip irrigation. And many of those each have advantages in terms of, they can get water more precisely to specific areas, but none of them are panaceas. I mean, we've seen people think that if you develop drip irrigation that you're going to save a lot of water, but in fact, oftentimes people just use more water more efficiently, but also grow more land and actually use more water. So there has to be a much better job of combining policies and incentives with these kinds of technologies in order to make them more effective. The next generation is going to be interesting. When are we going to really see around the world, for example, positive impacts of satellite-based remote sensing that can help measure groundwater and the movement of water? At what point will precision agriculture with ground sensors and others in developing countries be able to start moving up? Again, there's a whole complicated set of things together with society, because oftentimes those don't work as well with small farmers who can't take advantage. So there's a lot of ferment in society and economics around each of these technologies as well.
Ajay, ask Ertharin a question. Obviously on topic.
Ertharin, the Sustainable Development Goals that we have had a chance to look at and embrace in many cases. Of course, the rest of the United States barely knows what they are. But if they did, and you could start to move forward along this timeline that 2030 is a goal for humanity to accomplish these goals, how would you go about doing that? Hard question.
Great question.
And how does it affect water, obviously?
Of course. The reality is, we, the global community, we agreed to and passed the Sustainable Development Goals unanimously, as you know, at the United Nations. But much of what's in the goals and that unanimous passage was because of U.S. leadership. And if there was, without U.S. leadership, both from the private sector as well as from our government agencies, providing the support that's necessary in providing not just the support that's necessary over there, but the support that's necessary here at home to ensure that businesses are developing those tools that will make a difference in addressing the challenges of water volatility, to ensure that our capacity and our understanding of regulatory knowledge around government, around the role of government in water management, that we use that capacity around the globe, that we share that capacity with the globe, and how we fund the taxpayer dollars in development activities around the globe that supports that coherence. Achieving the SDGs, ensuring that we address the challenges of food security and water security mandate U.S. leadership. And that's what I would drive for and hope for to ensure our ability to achieve the outcomes.
Mark, I know strategy is really important to you, talking about how do we strategize from what's in this report and then going forward. Can you help us explain and understand where we go from here?
Yeah, I think a lot of what has to be done builds from what I said earlier of much more careful integration of the policies and institutions with the kind of technology space. I think there also has to be now a strategy of moving away from large-scale development throughout much of the world Basically, the big dams, there's a few out there that can still be built with in a cost-effective way and help farmers. But for example, in much of sub-Saharan Africa, those kinds of projects have been way too expensive in the past. The inability to fund those has led to, in a sense, what would be called economic water scarcity in Africa, even though there is water available. So you have to shift much more to focusing on farmer-led, small-scale irrigation, trying to bring in a lot, also the kind of enabling conditions, whether it's extension of knowledge and dissemination of knowledge, as well as highly targeted subsidies and credit programs to help them start adopting the kinds of technologies for the next step.
I'm just thinking for your sort of golden takeaways that you all got together and thought, I know what we want to make sure that we do on stage when we're talking about this report. Ertharin?
I start where Mark ended, and that's small farmer-led irrigation strategies. Recognizing the value that those tools have for the 500 million plus, potentially the 500 million plus small farmers across the globe who provide 80% of our food.
Ajay, from scarcity to security, I mean, that's a bold vision. What's your takeaway for our audience in the room?
I think it's really important to understand the difference between the capacity to feed the planet and the will to feed the planet, to have everybody fed. Today, I can tell you we have the capacity to feed everybody on the planet. We don't evidently have the will to feed everybody on the planet. That's a separate problem. How do we maintain the capacity to feed everybody is what this report is about, is to make sure the infrastructure is in place that builds some kind of resilience into our systems, that we can anticipate these challenges that we're facing, and not only we face in this generation, but generations of humans have always faced. It's not an easy thing to manage the earth and the life systems and the resources to create a food supply, and yet we see that we think we can maybe feed the planet from a rooftop. No, you can't feed the planet from a rooftop, but you can augment the food supply by all these wonderful new systems that are emerging, and they're going to continue to expand. So it's a effort that we have to make sure that we're all in this together. And maybe the last thing you can ask then is, as people understand that their stakeholders in the outcome of agriculture, please remember that successful agriculture sustains civilization. And that's whether at the smallest farm holder level or the largest. It's all part of this system that we need to have in place to deliver those calories and nutrient-dense calories every day. But it doesn't happen without the infrastructure in place.
I'm looking at you sitting on the stage, and you're very polished, very composed. I can't ask you a question that you don't know the answer to, which is fantastic. This is beautiful. Look at this. I'm just wondering, worst moment of this report, Mark? What he was like, why did I say I would do this? They don't pay me enough for this.
When AG and Ertharin challenged some of my fundamental conclusions about water policy. But we worked it out, I think.
What were they challenging you on?
The whole idea of how exactly do you implement economic incentives in water, and what types of subsidies do you use? And I don't think we've quite agreed, but the idea that you need to invest subsidies in the very highly targeted and smart ways of moving forward rather than sort of generalized things.
What did you disagree on?
No, Mark just said it. I think that was our primary point of disagreement.
Yeah.
Mark he's our expert, and he has long-held opinions, but...
I knew there was a but coming. He's our expert, but.
But the expert knowledge of what we've done in the past doesn't always provide the right answers for what we should do in the future.
Ertharin is throwing shade, Mark.
And everything we did with love. Every conversation, nobody ever raised their voice.
Yeah, it worked out well.
It worked out really well. We had these robust dialogues. And the report reflects those robust dialogues. And because I agree with him, we started talking about the issues related to subsidies and recognizing the peril of subsidies that are not targeted, subsidies that are not time-bound, and the impact that can have, the perverse impact that can have on agricultural production, but recognizing, we brought Mark around, getting Mark, the team to recognize the value of targeted time-bound subsidies for the poor and underserved who require this type of technology. So it's in the report. Thank you very much, Mark.
Ajay?
Just to add to that, I think we all we would like to understand that subsidies or support for agriculture generally comes as a reaction to crisis. When farmers in any region are in crisis, whether it's post-depression here in the United States or whether it's challenges in India, so the governments come up with, try and come up with solution sets that might help keep those farmers in business, keep them producing, and if it's subsidizing water so you get more water use or expand water use, if it's subsidizing communities in an agricultural area so they don't collapse, we understand that. And sometimes those subsidies, where the criticism comes, is that they've gone on too long or there's no sunset. But if we remember that they were created out of crisis, then at least we can kind of understand that, okay, let's evolve forward. And I think that's what this report is, evolving forward with a understanding that, as Ertharin said, I always use these Mark Twain quote. I know you're all familiar with Mark Twain, and the quote is, "You can't trust your judgment if your imagination is out of focus." Not the one about whiskey and water, right? Yeah. We know that water, but this idea that we have to imagine this future, we have to be able to use our imagination and then use this new technology and the new tools and the new toolbox that is emerging and is getting more and more dynamic every day to create then this future that we're going to build, that builds in resilience, that gives us this predictable water and food supply.
So Ajay, Ertharin, Mark will be around all day. You see them during the breaks, during the lunchtime. They will be there. You can talk to them some more. But for now, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.